What up? Back again with Labyrinth Guitars, and today this finalised 64 precision C stamped. C-shaped 64, apparently a bit of a rarity. Some previous videos we ran down what we were doing with this. It's had a refinish in this Fiesta Red. It seems a little thick for me, but whatever. I didn't do the work, the refinishing. But what was going on with this is that it had a previous refret, and whoever had done it, or at some point, the whole of this rosewood fretboard had been lacquered, been nitroed, kind of like a lacquer you would find on a Rickenbacker bass and guitars over the fingerboard. Obviously, with the all maple necks, they're lacquered anyway, but not usually on a rosewood. Clear dots, and it needed reassembling from its spray job. So what we did is we took it in, we removed the frets that had been put in, not the originals, so they were slightly larger as well from a vintage one, a little oversized. Remove the frets, and then obviously there's little bits of chip out appearing here and there with that, but once the frets were out, we then were extremely cautious to sand and remove the lacquer that was on there down to its original raw wood. We have to be careful because we don't want too much sanding that's going to change the radius shape at any point. And down this end, where you see on old vintage basses, they get kind of a fall away eaten into the wood there from years of playing. This is extremely thin. There's nothing there hardly. It's a millimetre maybe. There's one point I can see here where we're talking eighths maybe. Eighths? 30 seconds, not eighths. Eighths is pretty thick. 30 seconds. Who gives a shit? It's thin, bruh. You know what I mean? It's thin. And same with the edge as well. For the slots, they're really coming through. Some of them are almost borderline into the maple, the fret slots. Now, once we'd removed the lacquer with very cautious, careful sanding, and then we had prepped the fret slots, cleaned them out, filled any chip out that were there from obviously some previous stuff as well that were there, and then started the process of the refretting by getting the correct vintage size wire that we needed. And when we're doing the slots, we don't have a lot of room. It's been done before, so they've been cut. We didn't have a lot of room to work with. What we don't want is that tang on our fret to be too tall and then sit too proud, you know, where the fret won't physically sit into the board without having to recut the slot. And we cut a few, and we were borderline getting to the edge here because of how much material's been used removed previously. Couple, like, we don't really want to cut into this, but we need to get the frets in. On some of the frets where it was like, you know, bicycle clip time stress, we even removed a bit of material from the underneath of the tang and made that a little bit smaller so we could get everything sat in. Clean and prepped. In my fret press, which I use rather than the hammer technique, I will tap in some areas here and there just to properly reseat, but my process is get my frets on my fret roller, over radius them, and then individually go all the way down on my fret press arbor, which has a radius gauge brass insert, which is the same as this. Push that in, and then I like to run water thin super glue in any gaps, and so you'll see it wick into there, and then hold it down in my press for a certain period of time per fret, so then ends are sat in there nicely, and we're going to avoid any future popping up and things like that that may occur. Then we did the level and crown found any little bits where we spot leveled, which because the frets went in so nicely, it was very minimal. Very minimal. We just skimmed the tops of them. There were 1 or 2 points here which needed a little bit of extra attention, but in, crown, polish, neck on, and then, excuse me, we assembled the rest of it. Electronics, assembled those, original pots, original cap. We put a new ground wire from the base, the bridge, through to the back of the pot in the correct spot because this one had been ragged, it was too short. New ground wire in. There were a couple of screws that were not with it, that were missing, and this thumb rest is absent, but I think the dealer of this bass has that with them. If not, they will replace and find that. I didn't have those parts at my disposal, only use what I had at my disposal. Now there is, of course, there's the bridge cover there, and then there is the pickup cover which goes over the top of there, but there was also 2 of the period correct screws absent with that, so I've just left that, and I think the dealer, he has those lurking about somewhere. They didn't come with the package that came to me, so rather than just bung anything in there, we want to get some nice old ones in, so that's why that's missing. It ain't going to take too much. And set up with rotor sound, 45 105 new strings underneath this bridge plate, and somebody had gunked it up with loads of black tarry stuff, maybe to stop some of the screws from slipping and the saddles from dropping over time. We cleaned that up and restored all the threaded saddles there, and with the intonation, and we're in. I'm no bass player, so whatever, and it's going through a 10-inch guitar speaker, so it's not an accurate bass representation. That's my terrible playing you're hearing, no fret issues. Plays. Plays lovely all the way up. What these vintage basses can suffer from is this hump that appears in the wood there from years of compression of the bolts holding the neck in, and the strings tension and the truss rod, and you get, like on an acoustic you might call it a rising tongue. On these it's like a little hump, so kind of the neck with the relief in there, if I'm to exaggerate really, it kind of looks like a spine. It kind of scoops in and it can come up and hump over here in this area, and then you can get some dead spots in there. No matter how much material you want to drop off the frets when you're doing the fretwork, it's still there, and you end up having your action really high to avoid any. Nobody really plays here anyway. Whoever buys this thing for the ridiculous amount that it's going to be sold for, they're probably going to stick it on a wall for a start, or they're probably just going to be up here. So that's an issue you can have there. The way to correct that issue, if it's a hump in the wood, is rather than just hacking the shit out of the frets to try and get away with it, you have to take all the frets out. Luckily we did that with a D fret and a refret, and then you remove it. You create fall away in the wood, and you remove that hump by sanding, planing, rough sanding, filing. It would be planing is pretty extreme because you get chip out in the fret slots, but just a radius block or a fret leveling beam with some really aggressive papers on and go across and make sure you stick into radius and sand that hump out of there, baby. Making sure you don't go too thin on there, and then you do your fret. You make sure that your board is super straight when the truss rod is straightest it can be, and the neck is straight with your measuring gauges, and then you know you're going to avoid that issue. And again, my playing plus the guitar amp. Let's take that down. Beautiful. A little bit there, but I think I just need to adjust. This is going to come off because there is a screw that needs sorting out at this end, but we're getting that finalised. That's as lot. So the nut didn't need any alteration. In fact, I thought when you put new frets in, you always need to usually make a new nut because of the height difference. But I thought I'll check it first, and it's just lush. It's lush. It's come together with no need to mess with this here. It's beautiful. That's testament to some good work and some good fret work, right? From yours truly, of course. So again, 64 precision, refinished Fiesta red, refinished, resanded, reprepped board, refretted for what I can only assume is definitely a second time. Who knows how many it's had before then. But there we go, Lavrat guitars with an L series. Stinkingly vintage, beautiful bass. Sick. It's easy, innit?